Hey, everybody. This is another one of our Founders Corner. Today, I've got Kurt France with the Edifice to tell a little bit about his background, his story, hopefully keep us entertained and enthralled the entire time. So thanks for spending the time, Kurt. I know founders don't have time for this nonsense. They're too busy building and selling. So tell us a little bit about your background, your personal background.
Anything for you, KP. Yeah, my background, formerly in architecture, urban design, and real estate development. So really in the built environment. And that came out of my family. A lot of them were landscape architects. So I just grew up around project sites, seeing things get built, people drawing things on paper and trace, and then they were a reality one day. And that was really something of interest to me. And so I naturally followed in their lineage, except instead of doing landscape, decided to go into buildings, which my grandfather desperately tried to stop me from doing because he wanted me to follow in his footsteps, as most males do, where they want their grandson or son counterparts to do. And he basically said, you should go into landscape, Kurt, because you get sued a lot less than architecture. And that was his kind of last ditch effort. And I said, I don't care. Yeah, I went to architecture school 5 years, found out that that's a lot of work for not a lot of return. I decided around that time, this is right before the recession, that being an architect developer would be great because it sounded like I could have my cake and eat it too, type of thing. But I graduated 2007, which is the worst time to probably graduate from architecture in the history of architecture, right? As soon as the recession happened. So as soon as I came back from travel grants, awards, anything, everyone would not answer my phone calls who had lined up jobs for me, and or would just yell at me and call me stupid. And that was the beginning of my kind of professional career in the recession. So there was a lot of figuring things out right off the bat in the built environment. So I'd take on any job I could. I was trying to do landscaping in Los Angeles, and then I ended up working for an architect. And we did, the only thing that was going was art galleries at that time. So the art world was still going. And the first thing I ever designed and built fully was art galleries here in New York City. Eventually came to Columbia University, did a double master's in urban design, real estate development here, because a lot of the money went overseas to third world countries that didn't lose all their money in the recession. And they were building cities of 100 to 200,000 people. So I worked internationally in China and overseas, helping bridge the gap between the planning architecture and the real estate development. Worked over there for a while, and then eventually made my way back to New York City, worked for a developer here, renovating just some of the worst buildings in New York City. Literally, you get on a New York City worst building list if you have more than, I think, 5 violations per unit. And these were 35 to 55 unit buildings I was renovating and overseeing for them. And there was gun trafficking, drug trafficking, prostitution, stop work orders, you name it. I dealt with it, which still I have scars today, but eventually finished all those projects and kind of cut my teeth on the built environment then. And then one day, one of my friends who I'd known for a long time from architecture school said, "Hey, Kurt, you're good at dealing with crap. Why don't you come do that for me? I'm starting this new technology company." And I said, "Well, everything's going to be technology one day. I'm pretty spent with renovating terrible buildings in New York City. Why don't I come join you?" And so that was my segue into technology and startups. That company, Frustum, what they did was automate the design of 3D printed components for aerospace. That was the first thing we did. So I didn't know anything, learned everything, software, front end, back end, learned a lot about sales, marketing, finding product market fit, failing a lot of times there. We failed in, I would say, the aerospace. We didn't realize how conservative it was, that you had to certify each component. You had to certify the machine it was made on, and 3D printing was just too far ahead at that time, but found market fit in other segments. After that segue, they were successfully acquired. I brought all that knowledge back to my first passion, love, the built environment, and kind of found my way to Edifice, which we're working on now.
What was the process of, all great startups are trying to solve a problem. And usually the first problem is not the last problem. So what did you start identifying as problems to go start Edifice around?
What I started as is kind of a development shop for real estate developers that were looking for technology to commoditize it to attract millennials at that time. And that time is probably 2015, 16. So I did a lot of one-off projects that weren't really businesses. They were nice to have, but not need to have. So we did interactive touchscreens in the lobby or the elevator, pulling custom content to that brand. You could order tickets to TD Gardens off this, having this kind of experience so they could see technology in every aspect of the building. Part of the walkthrough help the kind of sales process. And knowingly, these weren't businesses. It just wasn't a need to have. It was kind of this nice to have. And just hanging out with people in development that were doing that full time, knowing that we did things that other companies couldn't do or said was impossible, really gave me a segue to seeing what people wanted. And we were actually having a beer one day with the VP's president or vice president of development, and we were talking about different ideas, and they said, hey, you know, what would be really great is if I knew how many people were in the gym or how my spaces are being used, because we're moving the gyms from the basement to the penthouse, right? This is during the amenity wars. It'll be really great because we're spending way more money on this, operating this. It would be really great to understand. And that was kind of the aha moment over a beer. And I was like, oh, that's definitely a business. I can see how that worked, given my background, given my experience with development and management and architecture. And so from there started a whole series of figuring out, well, where exactly is that most valuable, and where does that fit into who and why? So that was the beginning part of it.
And this was pre-pandemic? This
was pre-pandemic, yes, exactly.
I read an article the other day of converting hotels into multifamily property. Like there seems to be some asset fluidity around. I have an asset. It's not working in this way. I need to reposition everything. I need to reposition my space. And how have you seen that developing kind of these days?
I think every asset class has become, or is constantly becoming, more hotelified. I hate that word, but more service oriented. Space as a service. How many services can I jam pack into my square foot to differentiate me from whoever, because we can work or play, especially now, from anywhere. But that takes a lot more touch and a lot more management in that way. So that has kind of been a constant trend over time with, I would say, multifamily is obvious. We work in office, and now office trying to get people to come back, doing that same, hey, it's great to come back. You want to come back to the office. So the pandemic's just accelerated that. I think it's okay now that we're spending all this time and money as office people who traditionally said, hey, sign this lease for 5 years and I'm only going to talk to you when you don't pay your rent and when you're going to sign again, or if you don't, and that was it. But that's completely gone out the window. So the service orientation through all asset classes more and more important, and needing basically breaking down, becoming data driven is what is they're starting to learn there, because you may like a gym, and Megan may like the sauna, or who may like the coffee lounge, and it's all anecdotal and conjecture based on gut and based on what we see in a fleeting moment. So having the ability to understand objectively, have one single source of truth to operate off of now is really critical versus how things have gone before.
Do you think the industry is ready to be data driven? Because there's so much I've found in our industry and older industries, established industries, so much of an individual's self-worth is derived by, I know things, I've been doing this since before you were born type of attitudes. Mm-hmm. And then you say, no, we have data. Like, I don't necessarily, I mean, I'm less interested in your 20 years of experience. I'm more interested in the real-time data I'm getting now. What has that cultural resistance been like?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of resistance to it, especially if you're going to give them data to analyze themselves. There are no data analysts traditionally in real estate ever. Right? The numbers are very simple. It's always been a simple asset class. It's not like a technology business that you're trading on Wall Street, right? There's an asset, it's tangible, it's physical, it has this, you can see it very objectively. So to put data around this and complexity in data and analytics is very foreign to everyone. So the first problem is just saying, I gave you the data, here it is. There you go. They don't have data analysts to understand this, nor are they formally trained like I was. I would be very confused if someone gave this to me. I understand the value, but again, unlocking that value of that data to increase revenue, reduce costs, whatever it may be, that's the gap. So you have to have that full service for them and take care of it for them. And then it kind of turns from, hey, I have an assumption. I've been doing this all my life. I know change is constant. How are these things changed over time? And so it becomes a tool, a more advanced tool to use everyone's background, their lifetime of industry experience, and then accelerate that. Because now they can be everywhere at once. They can dig into the data different ways. They can have what if scenarios about how a space could be used, and then test that, because they can't be everywhere at once. But now with the technology where it is today, you're actually starting to do that, and that's the change agent I see versus just here's data, figure it out. That's not going to work at all.
It looks like what you're building has broad opportunity across all asset classes. Is there certain asset classes you're more focused on than others?
Yeah, I've definitely spoke to all different types of asset classes in the kind of data we're collecting around behavioral analytics. And through that journey, understanding that some value it more or less, or don't need such granularity to achieve a certain outcome they're looking for, understanding what's good enough and what's missing. And really any around hospitality is where we're mainly focused because of high touch and specifics is what they're interested in. So tracking a coffee machine, knowing if a side table is messy, if things are out of order, if someone's waiting more than 45 seconds at the front desk, they want to know that and know that in real time. Whereas in office space, private office space, no one cares about that, right? You don't have productivity metrics on people checking people in and out there. Multifamily, you're kind of locked in for a year in a contract. So you're not just going to leave or put a bad complaint on TripAdvisor that really affects the multifamily as much as hospitality. So anything hospitality oriented, especially now that the pandemic has had this result that was really not foreseen about the labor shortage, that people would not just return back to work because of vaccines. They are actually shifting where they work because now they have more options to go work for Amazon or drive for Uber for more or the same amount of pay, and they don't have to pull these grueling hours for kind of a thankless job. So that's been an opportunity where you can really give, much like an executive, kind of these superpowers to understand what's happening across their portfolio. You can do that down to the employee level by understanding where to go and when, so they can provide the best service with minimal effort.
Yeah, it seems, whenever someone hears the term efficiency, they immediately think, oh, you're trying to cut resources to improve your bottom line. The notion of efficiency is code for, get rid of people, use software to get rid of people. And I think what's really shifted now has been, there are no people, right? The narrative around robots are going to take all of our jobs. Well, it turns out like none of us want our jobs, and we're more than happy to let a robot do it. So it's interesting that, you're absolutely right. The labor piece in hospitality, forget about finding good talent, just warm bodies would be helpful at this point for a lot of these industries.
Yeah, it's just that has been a trend too before the pandemic, and that's accelerated that. over time. So it's important to note that the pandemic accelerated certain things that were already in motion, and then had slightly different outcomes than we expected in that way. So the efficiency part is not, I guess, removing people. I would say instead of efficiency, it's more about effectiveness. So you're putting someone there, you're building a hotel, an experience for someone to make an impact on them. Efficiency could mean you're doing the wrong thing very well, right? So being effective at, hey, the coffee, I was traveling in Dallas. I was just in Soho, and both of the coffee machines, the concessionary coffee machines, were out, right? No one's tracking that. No one knows cadence. So something very basic really pisses people off in the hotel when you're at a conference, you're out at events, you're networking, socializing, drinking. Now you're got to go back and do it all again. You can't get a coffee in the morning. And those are the kind of things that stick with you at that point. So being effective, right? And doing the right thing at the right time is really key in having employees, be happy, and also delivering the right service at the right time. Otherwise, who wants to get yelled at by the manager of go fill up the coffee? Why aren't you doing this? It's just a bad dynamic that is ripe for change.
Yeah. We talk a lot about how.
Oh, me? Okay.
We talk about our industry that it's rare. It is very common that our entrepreneurs are coming from the industry. They're not, tech folks that just wander into our industry. This is, they come from the industry, and you've had that journey coming from architecture to now tech entrepreneur. How do you? What are some tips? I think there's a lot of people out there at an architecture firm, at a construction company saying, I see so many problems. I want to go start a tech company.
Yeah.
But then they're not sure what that takes. What have been some of the top challenges you found, like coming from industry and moving into kind of a technology company?
Yeah, I would say in the built environment, ACE, it's really slow. And the culture it's just very slow. There's not a lot of reason to move. And even internally. So being able to iterate and change things and really build quickly is probably the biggest drastic change for me, because we'd be working on a project for months or years, right? And then it would finally be done. While in software technology, we can build a prototype, we can build a markup, we can talk to people, and in hours get that cycle, and then have to make a decision of how we would like to proceed, right? Are we going to focus more on cleaning? Are we going to focus more on design, efficiency? Like, what are the different ways that the customer is responding? And that was probably the biggest cultural shift for me, always being in the built environment there, which was difficult, I'd say, for a while there. But if anyone is looking, and I'm sure there's inefficiencies all over the place, especially in the built environment, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Really, it'd be to kind of understand about defining that problem, because everyone complains. It's like crying wolf type of thing, but are they going to give you money for this? Are they going to really put their reputation on the line to test out your product or idea? That's the true signal of what you're doing has cadence, has value. And I do a prop tech studio at Columbia University about data analytics, kind of 101. And out of that, they all come up with these different ideas. And, I frequently meet with students to help guide them on exactly that, because everyone always goes down the wrong path first, me included. I want to build something cool. It's going to have design. It's going to show all these things about New York City or Atlanta, and people are just going to gravitate to it. And coming from a design background, that's what I wanted to do first, right? And that's the completely wrong thing, I would say. It's fine. It's really diving into the problem in granular detail before you build anything. Like, you shouldn't have a software developer building technology just doesn't take off, right? There's a lot of iterating, there's a lot of learning and getting into the weeds, no matter what you want to do with it. Even if you've been in that industry architecture for years, you think you know everything, you're coming at it from a slightly different angle. And that subtle shift of saying, oh, now I'm selling software, or I'm selling a service to this industry couldn't be any more different than what you're doing right now. And I think a lot of people overlook that because they have experience, they've been formally trained, they know someone, but that's not how it works at all. And that was probably the biggest myth I've seen happen a lot, and a lot of mistakes just right out the bat.
All right. Well, very cool, Kurt. Thanks for taking the time. I know you have a lot on your plate, so really appreciate taking the time and sharing your story. And we'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, KP. Thanks.